Good morning, beautiful leaders. It is Coach Tish coming to you on this amazing and awesome Monday morning.
So today's class is all about freedom requires faith. Last week we spoke about how freedom requires fear, and so this foundations class, or a set of classes, really is all about creating our own sense of freedom. For those of you who do not know, I was laid off of my full-time job in academia February 2nd. And fortunately, I have been building my own sense of freedom for, I don't know, several years. We can say 3 years, but really it's been about 10. And so I am sharing with you some of my favorite ideas around freedom. So I'm going to show you this little piece that we talked about last week. So I drew them last week. There we go. I drew this diagram last week, right? And we spoke about how freedom requires fear. So fear was the first foundation. And this week we're talking about faith. Now, one thing that I love about faith, for those of you who do not know, yesterday I was able to attend TD Jakes, the Potter's House. And I love attending mega churches primarily because you get to see how a well-oiled machine runs. A mega church is definitely not a fly-by-night type of operation. A mega church is something that has been built over time, that has been typically they have a brand, they have a specific leader. The leader has written several books. The leader also teaches classes. So everything that I liken and everything that I love about the coaching industry, typically mega churches are involved. Mega churches have leadership development programs. There are opportunities for other people to grow up into leaders. The leader or the pastor themselves, the one leader is not the only leader. That he or she also encourages other folk to step up into leadership, to also step into their gifts. So everything that I love about the coaching industry is present also in mega churches. And so it was very appropriate that yesterday I attended the Potter's House because, again, I freaking love how this a well-oiled business and efficient and effective business runs. And so today's topic is all about faith. And the subtitle is, where is your evidence? Where is your evidence? So I'm not a big, hey, Coach Kathy, hey, Jaleesa, hey, Raina. So I'm not huge. I've got to say, let me put this out there first and foremost. I have read the Bible front to back. I used to sing on the praise team. I used to own several Bibles, a concordance. So I was, I'm not going to say that I was a Bible scholar, but I, like most things, when I find something that I enjoy and something that I find useful, I make it a point to get all the way up and through it, right? Like, I just love to learn. My mother prayed that over me when I was in the womb. And so this is the adult you have today. When I find something that I enjoy and I find useful, I try to learn everything there is to know about it. So if you are a Bible believer or not, you'll still find something relevant in this. But let's talk about faith, okay? So Hebrews 11:1 says, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. What's up, Nisha? I love your name, boo. So let me show you this, okay? So what is faith? Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen, okay? So I love the way that we have, the way that I've drawn this out, because, I used to always wonder, okay, so faith is, I was trying to remember the scripture and I always had a challenge. So faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Okay. So we know what substance is. Substance is what everything is all about, right? So what is something, made of? And hoped for, we know what that means. That means we don't quite have it yet. So we're hoping, we're wishing, we're praying, right? We're thinking positive. And then evidence, evidence is typically, I like to say evidence is an action, right? Because we know about that scripture that says faith without works is dead, right? So here, evidence is your works. And then not seen. This means that we do not have it yet. Okay, so what is faith? Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. So what does that mean? Today's subtopic, of course, is where is your evidence? So let's talk about evidence, okay? Sometimes we think that we have faith, and especially in the entrepreneurship world, when you're an entrepreneur, you are believing in something that does not yet exist. As entrepreneurs, we are creating things that do not exist yet. And we are hoping, believing, and praying that the results that we want will occur by way of the actions that we take. Okay, so when we take action, that's how we're showing that we have faith, that we believe that this is our calling, that we believe that something is going to occur at the end of the road, that we believe that we are walking in our destiny, right? When we take action. So let me tell you, when the very first time that I lived out my backpack back in 2013, I was traveling. So I bought a one-way ticket to Mexico, and the intention was for me to move to Belize. And one of the biggest questions that people kept asking me was, aren't you afraid? Like, you don't have a place to live yet. Like, do you know where you're going to be? I'm like, no, I'm not afraid. And the reason that I was not afraid was, in my mind, I felt like this was God. This is what God had called me to do. I had heard this message over and over again. And so in my mind, the fact that I was going out here, like bought a one-way ticket without having any more information, for me, that was me saying, okay, God, show me what you can do. Right? Like, this was me. This was that action was my evidence, right? That was me believing that if this is what I'm supposed to be doing, I'm gonna be taken care of. And I need to test this thing out because it's time. Like, my hands are thrown up. Like, I'm over the life that I was living. Like, I need to be able to see God show up. And if I believe that God is telling me to do this, then I need to freaking do it. Right. So this was me testing my faith, and not just testing my faith, but testing God. Because I'm like, OK, listen, I know I keep hearing this message that I'm supposed to be in Belize. I don't know nobody in Belize. I ain't never been to Belize. OK, let's see what happened. Right. Like, this was me testing my faith. So this was the evidence. Right. And frequently when it's time for us to test the evidence, we allow fear to get in the way, not realizing that freedom actually requires fear. That's what we talked about last week. So you actually need fear in order to begin testing your faith. So fear comes first, and then that faith, that action, right? That evidence is what comes next. So the reason that I want to talk about this, the reason that we're bringing this up is because faith is a very intentional thing. Right? Faith is not something that really happens accidentally. When I bought that one-way ticket and I made a commitment that I wasn't going to stress over where I was living and just really allow things to flow the way they flowed. And I bought the one-way ticket to Mexico, right? I went to Mexico first, and I had a place to stay in Belize, but I was going to travel throughout Mexico. And I just figured I would figure it out. I would find, like, something would occur. There's hostels, there's hotels. It wasn't going to be nothing too crazy. But what I realized was faith was intentional, right? It wasn't accidental. Like, I intended to test this thing out. I set the idea and the thought in my mind, and then I took the action that would test it out. Now, of course, next week we'll talk about the last tenet of freedom in my experience, which is what I always talk about. Freedom requires friends. So we're going to talk about that piece. But I really just want you to get it in your mind that you're going to be afraid, and it's okay. It's actually natural and normal. The thing is, when we get comfortable and we get okay with, number one, the unknown, and number two, feeling fear, and then learning how to maneuver with it, that is when we begin really building our freedom foundations. That's how we know that we are getting closer and closer to our freedom, when we are able to maneuver and act with fear. Right? Sometimes fear is I like to say, an ever-present help, but sometimes fear is really that thing, like our reminder that we're human, our reminder to have compassion on ourselves. Right? So when I was like first headed to Belize on this one-way ticket, I didn't have, a whole lot of connections there. Right. But what I did have was a couple of people who I had met who told me, hey, my brother will take care of you when you get to Belize. Right. And when I met the woman who told me that, ironically, I was volunteering And we had a conversation, and when she told me that, hey, my brother will take care of you, I was like, oh, okay, so maybe this faith thing, maybe this is where I'm supposed to be, because the pieces are starting to fall into place, right? And if I had not, when I met her and she told me that kind of solidified that I was on the right path for me, right? And so I felt comforted. I felt like I was on the right path. I felt sure of myself. Sometimes we try to feel sure of ourselves before we take an action, and that's not how it works. We got to take an action first, and then it's almost like we step out. They say we step out on faith, right? So it's like we take that first step, and then we allow the hand or the path to appear before us. So first you put your foot out as if you're taking the step, and then you allow the path to almost appear before you. So when I started making moves to, okay, I'm doing this release thing, and the pieces start falling into place, that's when it started making sense. Like, oh shoot, this is actually what I'm supposed to be doing, right? And that's when I began to feel sure of myself. That's when I began to feel confident. I wasn't confident before. I was afraid. I didn't have all the information. There was a lot of unknowns, but I took the step. And so I knew that if I failed, right? I knew that if I was not successful, if this thing did not work out, I'm like, okay, I got a master's degree. I got a mama. I can always come back home if need be, right? But that's actually not what happened. I actually kept my commitment, and I spent an entire year living out of my backpack, 2 months in Belize, right? And I had the greatest lessons and insights that I've ever had in my life as a result of simply stepping out on fear, right? And I understand, typically we run into places, we live in spaces, we're in relationships with people who make us feel bad about not being consistent, right? Like maybe you're not a consistent Christian. Maybe you don't go to church every Sunday. Maybe you don't read your Bible every day. Well, that's not what faith is. Maybe you don't always address your fears head on. Maybe sometimes you don't walk with your fears. And I just want to tell you, like, hey, that's completely okay. This thing, you're not going to be 100% perfect ever. And the minute that we get that into our minds and become okay with not being 100%, the quicker that we'll begin really walking down that path toward freedom. I remember when I first enrolled in my PhD in metaphysics program, right? I had just gotten hired onto the job that I just got released from in 2014. And I was a little bit nervous. I was a little bit afraid of kind of what was to come. You know, I had just finished this year-long backpacking tour, and now I had a job. I wanted to invest in my business, and I was a little bit nervous. Well, I had a mentor who said, hey, you know, based on the things that you've been doing, you might want to look into this program around metaphysics. And I looked at it, and it was on point. I was like, okay, wow, like I've already dropped out of, one PhD program. Sure, like let's try this one. This was in metaphysics and holistic life coaching. This is right up my alley, right? And so starting out, the program itself, you had to read and meditate every day. So this was the foundation of the program. You had to read these passages and meditate every day. And the more that I began to read and actually meditate, I started feeling like a lot of relief, right? This is how I was being able to beat my consistency, because I hadn't been consistent in the past, right? So I started to feel a lot more relieved around, okay, here's something where I'm winning, right? Okay, I got this thing. And I knew that, okay, if I don't necessarily do this, I may not be able to make it to my next level, right? I may not be able to make it to the next space in my life, because I believe that this program was part of my journey. Like this was part of, this was a missing key for me, this consistent daily practice. Well, the cool thing is, the more that I did the practice, the better I got. And I was not, let me tell you, my consistency was not 100%. Sometimes I would put it down, put the books down, put the practice down, and pick it back up, like any practice, right? all of life is really a practice. Faith is really about practicing. Within our Leaders Academy, we have an affirmation that we say we practice until we profit, right? And we recite this every day. And it's really all about profit doesn't always mean money. It means getting the result that you're looking for. That means that if you fail, there's a saying that you fall down 9 times, you get up 10. Right? This is how you become better. This is how you increase your faith. This is how you practice doesn't necessarily make perfect. Practice makes profit. Practice gets you the result that you're looking for, right? So you practice until you get the result. That means that you may not do this thing 100%. It's okay. You become intentional and you keep practicing until you get it. So, let's also talk about time, right? Because that's also something that gets in our way oftentimes. It's like, oh, I don't have a whole lot of time. I don't have hours to study and read and do all of this stuff. Not a problem. When I was first getting started, when I was first getting into this program, and when I was first getting into really identifying where it was that I wanted to go with my life and what freedom meant for me, speaking of practice, what I committed to doing, being intentional and practicing, all that meant was I started doing it every day. Even if I could only read for 1 minute or 2 minutes a day, I made it a point to do that. Right? When I was first getting started in this program, I would want to sit and read for hours, but I couldn't. I had a life. I had stuff that I had to do. And it wasn't until I really just began just having compassion on myself that it started making sense that, okay, as long as I'm able to read 1 page, if I can read 1 page, right? If I can read 1 page, then that's at least more than I did yesterday. So I stopped making myself feel guilty and making myself feel bad and talking down about myself. Really, talking worse about myself than I allow other people to talk to me. You know what I'm saying? Like sometimes we talk to ourselves like horribly, like horrifically, right? And it doesn't help our cause, right? It disempowers us. It takes away our power. It makes us feel horrible. And the worse you feel, the less action you take. And then when you attempt to take action, depending on how much negativity you've inserted into your spirit and inserted into your mind and inserted into your body, depending on how much of that you've spoken over yourself and spoken over your life, that's how much harder it's going to be for you to actually believe that taking one small step every day is going to be effective. But that's actually exactly what it is. When we start looking at habit change, for example, I drink a green smoothie now, right? Every day. Most days, right? Because I'm practicing. It's a practice. Some days I don't do it, but most days of the week I have a green smoothie. And what I realize is this is now one of my healthy practices, and it is making a huge difference. I was talking to, TMI in 3 seconds, okay? I was talking to one of my mastermind members about how inspired I am when I go to the bathroom and my boo-boo is green. Primarily because while I'm on this road trip, I'm not eating the best of everything, but I am having the green smoothie. So when I go to the bathroom and I see green, I'm like, okay, cool. At least I know that I'm having at least, this container full of good stuff. I'm putting something good in my body, right? I may not be drinking as much water as I could be. I may not be exercising as much as I could be, but I know that I'm doing at least one thing. I'm maintaining one thing that I'm continuing every single day. And I just want to share that with you, right? Because when we don't do the one thing, when we don't practice, when we don't be intentional about doing all of this, about increasing our faith, about making sure that the actions that we take is proof that we believe, right? That we believe that we're going to get this thing, that we're believing that we're going to get the result at the end of the day. When we don't take the actions, we're not able to affect the lives that we were sent here to affect. We're not able to live into our calling. I believe personally, through my own examples of burnout and experiences with burnout, that That's part of the reason that we get to the burnout. That's part of the reason that we experience depression and don't know that we're doing it, because we aren't taking the small actions. Those small steps over time is what build you up. A building is built brick by brick. It's not lay them all down one at a time, 1,000 at a time. No, it's one at a time. And when you step your game up to take one action at a time, right? One action, one small action. It could be reading one page a day, but whatever it is that you feel will intentionally get you to where you're going and help you to practice, as well as take the smallest amount of time, 1 minute. Right? You commit yourself to doing 1 minute, being intentional with that 1 minute, and then being intentional about building the practice up. I'm telling you, over in 30 days, it will change your life. It will change your life. So that's all I got for you today. Remember, freedom requires faith, okay? And for freedom, of course, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. And so if you want to make sure, if you want to increase the positivity, the amazing things, the freedom in your life, right? You've got to be intentional. Number one, you've got to practice every day. Number two, and you've got to do the smallest thing possible. Give yourself 1 minute to make it happen. If your thing is about exercise, exercise for 60 seconds every day. Make that commitment to yourself, and I guarantee you in 30 to 60, sometimes even 90 days, you will see different results. You'll see a better you, because remember, you're doing more than what you did before. So let me know if this has been effective to you. Tell me the one takeaway that you got from today's Freedom Foundations class. One takeaway. And I look forward to working with you and working with you soon. If you have not already signed up for the workshop that I'm hosting, it starts, I think May 1st. You can go to Coach Your Damn Self. And so we're going to be talking about burnout, really, and how to prevent it, how to recover from it, and how it affects us in building our coaching businesses. So you can go to Coach Your Damn Self, CoachYadamnself.com. I'm a huge believer and proponent that you have the juice. Right? As leaders, we got everything we need. It's really just a matter of taking action on what we know, and really creating curriculum around the success that we have had. That is how we become successful coaches, is we identify and really give ourselves credit for the action that we ourselves have taken. Give ourselves credit for the actions that we ourselves have taken. Give ourselves credit for the action that we ourselves have taken. Don't even matter how small it is. But once we begin giving ourselves credit, that is how we build our curriculum. And those small steps is now what we pass on to other folk. Because remember, the small steps that we take are mountainous steps for the next person. So I love you. I can't wait to talk to y'all soon. Again, please go sign up for the workshop that's starting May 1st. And I can't wait to talk to y'all. Peace.